This is the third principle of history and economics against the Chinese Marxist model. And the third principle is the efficiency of free markets and the responsiveness of democracies. Free markets are more responsive and efficient in the allocation of resources, as basically they go to where they will find the highest return, which in turn is where the citizen wants to have things or consume things or relax. That gets us bottled water. It gets us smartphones. It gets us these massive Stanley drinking cups. Now, in a democracy, if the bounds of acceptable conduct are exceeded, such as in pollution, the citizenry is able to push back through the democracy, through elections. Our air, water, and soil were being polluted at a higher rate in the 1970s, 1980s, and environmental legislation was passed in response to the concerns of the citizens to make our air, water, and soil cleaner. But to pollute less costs money. And that's a problem for the central planners in China, because they're unlikely to divert money from production to make a better environment, unless they're forced to do so. In a dictatorship, for the citizen to object to the conditions on the ground risks imprisonment, it risks loss of job, lower social scores, so the citizen is slow to object. Day after day, the citizens of China are exposed to poor air, water, and soil. Grit on the teeth, grime in the nose and throats, compromised health. The dictators of China have moved industry out of city centers to outside of cities. There was a story of the 2008 Beijing Olympics where they were shutting down production in the hope that a cloud of smog would not descend over Beijing, and they pulled it off. It used to be on your Apple iPhone, you could see unhealthy air quality in Beijing day after day. Now, I don't know if it's because they've improved the air quality or because they've muscled Apple to stop showing the poor air quality in major Chinese cities. But through the policy of moving industry outside of city centers and moving their power plants outside of cities or away from city centers, they're still pumping out more CO2, but they're not doing it in city centers. At the beginning of 2024, China was by far the biggest importer of oil and coal of all nations, and they represented 30.7% of all CO2 emissions worldwide. In fact, in July 2023, China had 1,142 coal-fired power plants. In comparison, India had 282, the US had 210, 170 of those were slated for removal by 2030. The first half of 2023, China had approved 50 new coal-fired power plants. That means at a rate of 2 new coal-fired plants per week. That has slowed in 2024. According to Global Energy Monitor, China accounted for 95% of new coal-fired power plant construction in 2023. Now, that would also include power plants that China is building in other nations, but it also includes coal-fired power plants that are used to produce quote-unquote green minerals and resources. It is 6 times more intensive in cobalt, lithium, manganese, rare earths, aluminum, copper to make an EV, for example. And to get these so-called green minerals, they set up coal-fired power plants to run the mills, to refine the ore. And that sounds counterproductive. Don't believe the green gaslighting about solar panels, wind turbines, EVs in China. The growth of pollution produced in China increases every year. It is a failure of a dictatorship in that the citizens cannot push back against the excesses in their environment. In fact, in a socialist country, why would one arm of the government shut down a polluting factory owned by the other arm of the government? Socialism is ownership of the means of production by the state, and that translates into unrestrained pollution and no accountability. When there are no elections, citizens cannot tell their socialist dictatorship of a problem, and so there's no one to tell the polluting entity to stop polluting. Only if the CPC, the Communist Party of China, feels its grip on the Chinese people is threatened will they try to pollute less. not because they like the environment, but because they want to stay in power. They've been the masters of China, and as they see it, it's been a strength that they've had no free elections since 1949 when they seized power. Versus that actually represents a festering weakness that is eating away at their absolute control over the Chinese people. At least in a democracy, we're able to be responsive to the complaints of the citizens while we enjoy the inherent benefits of free markets. Thank you.